Hi, I'm John Reed with QualityCoding.org, and today I want to talk a little bit about AppCode and why I use it, and specifically how it helps me do test-driven development for Objective-C. So I'm going to bop over to this example that I made some time ago, which was my sort of intro. The problem here was how to test a method that is interacting with user defaults and incrementing a value or starting with 0 if the value wasn't present in user defaults. So, without further ado, let's start a new project. A static library is fine. I'm not going to go into details about test-driven development because you can get that in my other screencasts. Instead, I'm going to talk about AppCode and a little bit about how how things have changed, what I've learned since my first go around on this. Now, here we are in AppCode. The first thing I want to do is, and this is a little different from Xcode, I want to add a testing configuration. Instead of having it all bundled into a single scheme, AppCode chooses to go the route of being more flexible to set up multiple configurations. In this case, I want to set up a test configuration. I'll call it tests. And then I want to just run this on the simulator. AppCode has a whole lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'm showing you the long way through the menus so that you can see what I'm doing, and then I'm going to start probably narrating my my shortcuts since I don't have fancy screencasting software. All right, run in simulator, go, and nothing surprising here, except now this is the very first time, very first launch, and the simulator came forward. But now let me do this again. I'm going to come over here, or I can Control R and run them again, and look what didn't happen. The simulator did not pop forward on me. It stayed in the background, out of sight, out of mind. It's not distracting me from my focus on test-driven development. Thank you, JetBrains. All right. Now, one of the first things I do is select these, auto scroll to source and from source, so that I can just click here instead of double clicking. Command delete is a really handy thing for deleting an entire line. Look at that. Let's just go through and get rid of this cruft. Now, I do want to use Hamcrest and Mockito, or my Objective-C variants. The easiest way to do that by far is if you come over to the Mockito instructions and use CocoaPods, grab this little bit here and watch. CocoaPods, create a pod file. I'm going to paste that in and change the target to, oh, look at that auto completion. Now I'm going to install OC Mockito, and CocoaPods is going to go out and grab all of its dependencies and bring those in as well. Pay attention on the left here. Right now it's a TDD example. Whoop, there we go. It changed from a project to a workspace containing multiple projects, including my pods. And it's lovely. So, just to prove to you, in Xcode, these would be called code snippets. In AppCode, they're live templates. I've made a few of my own, for example, for popping in the headers and the define for OC Hamcrest. And if you see there it is. I can start doing Hamcrest. That's great. In fact, I also want Mockito. All right. With that, let's get started. I'm not going to run through the whole example, which is really kind of a kata. I'll probably stop partway through once I've shown you the interesting bits. that I use frequently in AppCode, and I'm sure there's a lot that I don't use, probably stuff that I don't even know about. So let's start with, well, you see I've got various live templates to help me write different kinds of tests, including the ones that, for example, for testing outlets and buttons, but I'm just going to start here. Next, reminder ID with no current reminder ID in user defaults should return 0. I'm going to press enter, and it moves my cursor automatically to the middle of the method to keep typing. Now, one way that I code differently in AppCode as opposed to Xcode. In Xcode, I would tend to write everything left to right. In AppCode, I tend to write everything inside out. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to say yes, mock NS user defaults, and I'm just, you can see I'm selecting things and pressing enter to get them. Now I want to assign this to a variable. There's a shortcut, but I'm going to bring up Control T to show you the wonderful refactoring menu. Look at these refactorings, way more powerful than Xcode on this front. And in this case, I want to extract a variable. Normally, I would do this with a single keyboard shortcut, but I'm going the long way to show you. And it says, you know, I think I'll, JetBrains, if you're listening, it would be nice if, I should just submit this, if you were OC Mockito aware so that you could create a suggested variable name for me. And I'll change this to be more specific. Again, I hit enter and it says, oh, you want NS user defaults star, because it knows that you're never going to have NS user defaults without the asterisk there. So I've got my mock, and again, inside out, I do Command J to bring up a list of common things. And in this case, I'm going to allocate an example. And the first time I did this, I showed how to use constructor injection. And I did something like that. And this is good, and you should still prefer constructor injection over property injection as long as it's your own class. But in this case, NSUserDefaults isn't my own class, and specifically there is a default value that we want, a suitable default. That's the standard user defaults. When you start talking about a suitable default value, then it's probably easier not to do constructor injection, but instead to do a regular constructor and then inject it through a property. So let's just continue here, and you see it shows example in red because it doesn't know what example is. If I move the cursor back here, and this is part of the magic of AppCode, you do this a lot, is hit Option Enter. Option Enter, and it says, well, what is example? Well, I know that I want a new class. Now this is an example of how with AppCode you think more in terms of semantics and not so much in terms of typing. So I'm going to say I want a new class, and it's going to ask me some questions about this, like which group it belongs in, and target, yeah, and I'll say okay, and there, it's made it. I hit Command Tab to switch between my open files, and you see it's quite happy. It is satisfied. Of course, I want to assign this to a variable, so now I'm going to extract a variable, except instead of bringing up the refactor this with Control T, which I still do for a lot of the ones that I haven't memorized, I'm going to do Command Option V for variable, And it's going to say, well, which part do you want to extract to a variable? Why the whole thing, please? You notice that it sets up the right type. It's just prompting me for a name. It's even provided a good name. Example is not a bad name. I'm going to change it to SUT, though, for system under test, which I like to do in my test code to identify which object is the object under test. With that, I want to say user defaults is mock user defaults. Again in red, it's asking, what is this thing? Why, I will tell you. Option enter. I would like to create a new property. It asks some questions, though yes, I accept those things, and there, it's done. I'm not even going away from my test code right now. Now, one difference between constructor injection and property injection or setter injection is that you do need to provide that suitable default. And this test, the test that I'm going down here, will not help me in that. So let's hold off on that. And actually, let me pull this out to a different test case entirely. I do this from experience. Example default tests. Now I'm pulling this out into a separate test case so that I can have a fixture that is simple and that does not override the defaults. I do this from experience. I know that makes life easier. So in here, I want to say test what? Default user defaults should be standard user defaults. Press enter, go there, and I'll say, why make me an example, and command option V. Oh, let me get out from there. SUT, and then I can say assert that SUT user defaults is the same instance as standard user defaults. Look at how little typing I'm doing. It pops up and I accept, pops up and I accept. Now I'm going to Control R to run my current configuration, which is the tests. It's going to go off. It's not going to pop up the simulator, and it fails as I want it to because I have not provided this suitable default. Let's go over to the user defaults, and again, option enter, because I want to implement an accessor. And it says, well, which, how many, do you want the setter? Do you want the getter? Oh, I just want that getter there. Okay, boom. In one shot, there it is. It's a really good stab at it. I just need to change that, and I'm good to go. Also, personal preference. I don't like braces. You can scream about that, but that's why I have tests, and GoToFail will not affect me. I boldly claim until you read about my name in the news in infamy. So now let's Control R. Expect this now to pass, and that's good. Let's go back to our tests. So that the default tests is good. Now let's bring this back and continue where we were, which was to say, now I've got my my given section or a range. Now I act SUT next reminder ID, and I want this to return an NS number. And that looks good. Again, remember with test-driven development, I'm looking at from the point of view of the caller to say, are these the right sort of semantics I want to express? Now, by this point, it should come as no surprise that what I want to do is hit Option Enter and say, yes, create me this new method. And it asks some questions, which I'm fine with the defaults. And it returns nil, which is even nicer than my first stab at it, which was to return some weird NS number. Nil is better. And now I can assert that reminder ID is 0. Also note the style that I've adopted from Roy Asherov is not to have explicit comments like I used to, given, when, then. Instead, I have 3 sections separated by blank lines, and also note, while I'm here, the name, the very long and wordy name, which has to start with test, unfortunately. We don't have annotations yet. Next, reminder ID, so it's like, what am I calling, and what are the conditions, and then what are the results. So all that's just, that's not app code, that's just me. All right, Control R. Expect this to fail, of course. Come back, set this to 0, expect it to pass. Super. Now let's say, well, besides returning 0, it should save 0 in user defaults. Right? So instead of that assertion, I'm going to say verify that the mock user defaults was called with set object for a key where the object is 0 and the key is current reminder ID. Notice the squiggly here, which is app code alerting me that I've got an unused variable. So I'll just, get rid of that sucker. Control R. And it fails. Let's come back here. Show off my new use of dot notation. Here's another nifty thing that AppCode does. I'm going to enter double quotes and watch what it does. Boom. It enters 2 double quotes and leaves the cursor in the middle for me to type. Thank you, JetBrains. Run. Expect that to pass. Let's come back and do some refactoring. Oh, here's one more thing I want to show you. When in Xcode, when panels come in and out, they slide in and out with these fancy animations. Well, guess what that does? That slows you down. I want them to pop in and out. And really wish Xcode had a setting to turn that off. All right, let's do a little refactoring here. I'm going to Control T because I don't know the keyboard shortcut for extract instance variable. I should probably find out. And it's helpfully prefixed the instance variable with an underscore, which is nice in production code. In test code, I'd rather not have the underscore, so I'll just remove that, hit enter to accept it, and let's just grab this one too. I'm going to hit 7 for instance variable. Now this seems to be a bug. it's not formatted correctly. There's a way to reformat. Now, I happen not to remember how to do that, except that there is this help. Find the action. Why didn't it show? Oh, there it was. Reformat. And it says, what would you like to reformat? Oh, I'd like to reformat that. Boom. So that's a little bug. Won't be hard at all for them to fix, I'm sure. Okay, let's extract this. Yeah, let's just go with that. Let's put this in a setup like that, and corresponding teardown to get rid of the SUT. I don't care about the mock. And pull out the common code. Refactoring, remember, you must start in green and end in green. Here we go. And we are good. All right, so I think I'm going to stop there because that's enough to show you some really, really cool stuff. Other nice things are, well, extracting methods is a pleasure. Oh, changing signatures of methods is a real pleasure because, yeah, you have to do that sometime. To say add a new argument, and you say I want to change the signature of a method to add an argument, and it'll go and adjust all the callers to pass in nil, and then you can go and chase them all down to do something else. Or one of my favorites is Command Shift up and down. That moves the selected or the thing at that scope up and down by its scope, as opposed to, say, that. Lots of coolness. Again, this is really scratching the surface of app code, but I hope you go and give it a try. They're not paying me. They ought to pay me to say this, but this is just great, and it helps me move quickly in test-driven development and express the intent and semantics of my code without worrying so much about typing or even what file I'm in. If you want to see like what it's constructed, say I didn't type that and I didn't type that. Okay, I'll stop there. Cool stuff.